He was 17, the quietest kid in the room, hand-picked for a mentorship that promised a future. But when he read the contract out loud, the CEO's smile disappeared, and the truth behind the program started to unravel in front of everyone. They picked him up on a Thursday morning. Grey Corolla, government plates, 2 men in clean suits. It wasn't dramatic, no flashing lights or agents talking into their sleeves, but it was serious. His mom, Kellan Travers, kept clutching her rosary in the doorway, even though she wasn't Catholic. "Be smart, baby," she said, her voice tight. "And don't trust everything that smiles at you." Her son, Kellan Travers, adjusted his collar. The shirt was slightly too big, second-hand from a cousin, but ironed and tucked like it was tailored. Kellan was 17, quiet, polite, the kind of teen adults liked because he never made noise. But he noticed everything. That morning, he wasn't heading to school in Columbus, Ohio, like usual. Instead, he was going to the glass and steel headquarters of Halbrook Dynamics, one of the most influential logistics firms in the Midwest. He'd been selected, hand-picked, they said, for their elite summer mentorship. Out of over 300 applicants, only 8 had been chosen. Kellan was the only one from East Linden, and the only black student in the group. The building was ridiculous. A triple lobby, indoor garden, touchscreens in the elevators. And in the middle of it all, the founder himself, Richard Halbrook. White hair, sharp jaw, expensive smile. He walked like the air bent around him. "Ah, Mr. Travers," he said when they were introduced. "I've heard good things. Heard you cracked a citywide coding challenge in under an hour." Kellan just gave a small smile. Halbrook leaned in. "That's exactly the kind of mind we want shaping the future. Let's see what you can do." The first week was all about observation. Interns were told to soak in the culture, which meant lots of sitting in rooms full of confident people talking about things like Q4 traction and vendor leverage while sipping water that came in square bottles. Kellan listened. He rarely spoke. But his eyes moved fast, tracking names, roles, reactions. He noticed how every exec said diversity, but meant appearance, not influence. He noticed how the black security guard at the entrance wasn't allowed to sit, and how the janitor, a woman who looked like she'd be his auntie, kept her eyes on the floor. He wasn't angry, just watchful. Every evening, he wrote notes in a small marble notebook his mom had given him. Names, patterns, things that didn't quite add up. One day, while the others laughed with their mentors during lunch, Kellan found himself alone in a side office with a view of the rooftop garden. On the desk sat a manila folder marked YPP, Partner Contracts, Revised Terms. He shouldn't have opened it, but curiosity does what it does. The contracts were clean, polished. But on page 5, buried in legalese, was something that made him pause. It was a clause. Something about exclusivity and limiting future engagement in competitor initiatives. It sounded harmless, but it wasn't. If signed, it meant none of them could intern elsewhere in logistics for up to 2 years, which in teen years was forever. He blinked, closed the folder, stood up and walked away. He didn't say anything. Not yet. But he made a note in his book. Clause 5.4, box trap. Why bury it? That night, at the dinner table, his mom asked how it was going. "Different," he said. "They talk a lot, but not to you." "More at you," she nodded. "Just remember what I told you." "I do." He looked down at his rice and beans, then back at his mom. "Hey, Ma, if someone tries to trick you into something, but real quiet-like, should you call it out? Even if it's risky?" Renee didn't even blink. "If your gut sees the game before they finish dealing the cards, you stand up. No matter the table." But Kellan didn't know yet that standing up would make some people want to knock him back down. The next morning, Kellan walked into the building with his shoulders square and his face blank. The others joked around near the smoothie bar in the lobby, laughing too loud, trying to sound like they belonged. Kellan didn't bother. He wasn't here to impress anyone. He was here to see what they weren't saying out loud. He kept that manila folder in the back of his mind, tucked somewhere between his temple and his gut. The clause was bothering him, not because he didn't understand it, but because he did. At 10 a.m., the group was scheduled for a prep session before Friday's Youth Partnership Roundtable. It was being framed like a celebration. Interns would meet executives, shake hands, and sign off on new partnership documents, contracts that would solidify their future potential at Halbrook Dynamics. The interns were buzzing about it, especially Bryce Lamont, a loud kid from Scottsdale who hadn't stopped talking since orientation. "They're going to quote me in Forbes," he said, chewing gum like he was auditioning for a reality show. "Just watch." "Sure," mumbled Eli Nguyen, eyes glued to his phone. Kellan sat in the back, flipping through the latest draft of the agreement. It was almost identical to the version he saw in the office, except now it was printed on premium ivory paper and had a sleek cover sheet with everyone's names in embossed gold. He turned to page 5. There it was, Clause 5.4, reworded, but still a trap. This time it read, "Participants agree to a period of professional exclusivity to Halbrook Dynamics and its subsidiaries for a duration of 24 months following the conclusion of this internship." He looked around. No one else seemed to be reading. They were too excited. He leaned toward the girl next to him. Ariel Dansby, sharp and quiet like him. "You read this yet?" he asked, tapping the page. She shook her head. "Not really. They said it's standard." "You trust that?" She hesitated, looked down. "Should I not?" Kellan didn't answer. He just pushed the paper toward her. She scanned it. Then again. Her brows drew tight. "Wait. We can't intern anywhere else. Not for 2 years, not even a part-time gig." She sat back slowly. "That's not right." "Not even close." Later that afternoon, during a scheduled reflection hour, Kellan found a quiet spot in the break lounge, watching the reflections of people through the glass wall. He saw 2 junior lawyers walk by, Mr. Penfield and Ms. Rhonda Vargas, talking quickly, whispering with serious looks. He caught just a piece of their conversation. "No one's going to notice, Rhonda. They never do." "But these kids aren't dumb. You saw Travers this morning." "I'm telling you, it's nothing. Just keep it clean. Legal's already signed off." They passed, and Kellan exhaled. He hadn't even said anything publicly, and already his name was being mentioned. He didn't like that, not at all. That night, he stayed up late in his bedroom, sitting at his desk with the contract open in front of him and a blank page on his laptop. His mom was watching a rerun of Judge Mathis in the living room, but all Kellan could hear was the sound of legal language moving in circles. He began writing out a short version, plain English, of what the contract really said. Then he compared it to the sugar-coated version they were all being fed. It was like reading 2 completely different documents, and the deeper he looked, the worse it got. Not only were they binding teens to Halbrook for 2 years, but they'd also included language about non-disparagement, meaning if anyone said anything negative about the program or the company, even on social media, they could be dropped and blacklisted. Kellan leaned back, closed his eyes. This wasn't a mistake. This was on purpose. He thought of his mom again, of the way her hand tightened when she held his face and said, "Don't trust everything that smiles at you." He thought of Bryce, so busy trying to get noticed. Of Ariel, finally reading the fine print. Someone needed to say something, but saying it in front of the wrong people might mean never getting a seat at any table again. By Friday morning, the air in the conference center felt heavier than usual. Kellan arrived early, walking past the wide staircase that curved up to the executive floors. The building was always cold, but today he noticed it more. The youth roundtable was being held in a glass-walled boardroom on the 20th floor, just high enough to make the city feel small through the windows. Inside, the long oak table gleamed under pendant lights. Nameplates were laid out. Bottled water, fresh fruit, pens that looked more like jewelry. The interns filed in one by one, some in pressed suits, some still fidgeting with their ties. Halbrook was already there, standing at the head of the table, smile firm, silver cufflinks catching the light. "Welcome," he said, spreading his arms. "This is a moment. For you, for us. A celebration of potential and responsibility." Kellan sat 3 seats down from the CEO. He kept his folder on his lap. Everyone else had theirs opened neatly in front of them. "We'll be reviewing final partnership documents today," Halbrook said, glancing down the table. "Standard stuff. Your mentors will guide you through the key points. We'll wrap it up with a group photo. Shouldn't take more than 40 minutes. A woman with a slim tablet started distributing final copies. Kellan waited, staring at the gold logo embossed at the top of the packet like it was mocking him. He looked left. Bryce was scrolling through his phone. Right. Ariel was chewing the cap of her pen. No one was reading. He waited until Halbrook sat down and the room settled into silence, papers rustling and chairs creaking. Then he raised his hand. Just one hand. Calm. Controlled. Halbrook's head tilted. "Yes, Mr. Travers?" Kellan stood. His voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. "Excuse me," he said. "But this clause is a trap." Silence hit the room like a slap. Halbrook's smile stayed frozen for a beat, then dropped like a stone. "I'm sorry?" Kellan opened his folder, turning to the marked page. "Clause 5.4, professional exclusivity. It blocks us from working with any logistics-related company for 2 years. He held it up. "It's written as opportunity, but it's a block. You're telling us we can't grow unless we stay with you." The room didn't breathe. Halbrook cleared his throat. "That's a strong interpretation, Kellan." Kellan didn't sit. "It's a fact, not an interpretation. Also, Section 7.2, it stops us from speaking about our experience publicly unless it's positive. Even online." Ariel flipped through her copy. Then others followed. The rustle of pages got louder. One of the junior lawyers, Ms. Vargas, shifted in her chair. Her mouth tightened. "This is a mentorship program," Kellan continued. "Not a contract trap. We're high school kids, and you're locking us out of the future." Halbrook leaned back. The smile was gone. "These terms are standard practice in professional environments, and they've been vetted thoroughly." Kellan didn't blink. "Then maybe the practice is the problem." For a moment, no one moved. Then Ariel whispered, "He's right." Another intern, Diego Menendez, nodded. "I didn't even read that part." Bryce was still holding his pen. Frozen. "Wait. What?" Ms. Vargas stood. "Let's take a short break." Halbrook held up a hand. "No. Let him finish." Kellan hesitated. His palms were sweating. But his voice stayed steady. "This isn't just about me, or us. If this clause was honest, it wouldn't be buried. You put it here because you thought we wouldn't notice, or we'd be too scared to question it." Halbrook stared at him. "You think I'm tricking you?" Kellan didn't flinch. "I think you're counting on silence." The tension stretched, then snapped. Halbrook stood. "Session's over. We'll revisit these documents after internal review." He turned and walked out without another word. The interns stayed in their seats, stunned. Ms. Vargas grabbed the remaining folders and followed. Kellan sat back down slowly. His hands were still shaking, but not from fear. From something else. Ariel leaned over. "You just broke the damn room." But what Kellan didn't know was that breaking that room had just placed a target squarely on his back. The room didn't return to normal after that. There was no bouncing back. Not even the free catered lunch softened the edge. The other interns hovered near the hallway in awkward clusters, uncertain whether to joke, whisper, or just go back to their cubicles. Kellan sat alone in the break area, poking at a soggy Caesar salad. A TV mounted on the wall ran a muted news segment, but he wasn't watching it. His mind was still replaying Halbrook's reaction. Not the words, but the look. That switch. The moment someone who'd been smiling suddenly wasn't. Ariel appeared with a plastic cup of iced tea. She slid into the chair across from him. "You all right?" she asked. "Yeah," he said, though he didn't sound convinced. She leaned in. "That clause. I wouldn't have noticed it. You did. That matters." "I shouldn't have had to say it." "Yeah, but you did. And that's not nothing." Kellan met her eyes. "They're gonna try to flip this on me." "Maybe," she said. "But you said it out loud. That's what makes it stick." The next day, his keycard wouldn't open the elevator to the 5th floor. He tried again. Same result. The security guard, Mr. Denley, a kind man who usually greeted him with a fist bump, just looked at him, puzzled. "You switched teams or something?" Not that I know of. Mr. Denley tried his own card. It worked. Weird. I'll call it in. Kellan forced a half smile. Thanks. He took the stairs. When he got to his assigned workstation, his computer was gone. Just gone. A small note was taped to the desk. Please check in with HR on 8. He sat down anyway, pulled out his notebook. 5 minutes later, Diane from HR showed up with a forced smile. Morning, Kellan. Let's have a quick chat upstairs. He followed her silently. Inside the HR suite, they sat in a small room with no windows and neutral grey walls. So, Diane began, her voice all sugar. About yesterday. There's been some confusion. We just want to make sure you're feeling supported. Kellan raised an eyebrow. Supported? Well, you brought up some concerns during the round table. That's great. Really. We encourage feedback. But next time, maybe speak to your assigned mentor first. Let's work collaboratively, you know? Kellan leaned back. If I had asked permission first, would you have listened? Diane's smile stiffened. Kellan, no one here is trying to suppress you. But public confrontation in a professional environment can create discomfort for everyone involved. He blinked slowly. You mean the CEO? I mean the room, she replied, looking down at her tablet. Anyway, for now, you'll be shadowing with facilities for a couple days. They need some tech help with inventory. A good learning opportunity, and away from the noise. Is this a punishment? Of course not, she said, too fast. He left the room without another word. That afternoon, while logging outdated monitors in a dusty storage room, Kellan saw something he hadn't expected. Mr. Penfield, the junior lawyer from earlier, walking toward him. He was holding a plain brown envelope. I'm not here officially, Penfield said. Just so you know, Kellan stayed quiet. That clause, Penfield went on. You were right. And not just about that one. There are others. Small print in similar contracts going back 3 years. Always with students from certain neighborhoods, always buried. Kellan took the envelope. Why are you showing me this? Penfield looked around. Because I sat through enough meetings pretending I didn't see it, and I saw what happened when you spoke up. That wasn't about contracts. That was about control. He started to leave, then paused. You're braver than I was at 17. Kellan opened the envelope slowly. Dozens of pages, past agreements, email exchanges, meeting notes, a signature list that repeated the same initials. RH proof. Real proof. But proof only matters if someone's willing to risk everything to show it. Kellan didn't go home that night. Not right away. He stayed in the public library on Grant Avenue until closing, sitting in the far back, surrounded by his notes, Penfield's documents, and a borrowed laptop. He wasn't a hacker, wasn't even trying to be. He just knew how to read, knew how to spot patterns. And now he had something solid. Over 3 years, Halbrook Dynamics had been running the same youth partnership program across 3 different cities: Columbus, Toledo, and Indianapolis. In every case, students from underfunded public schools had been selected, flattered, and then locked into exclusivity contracts that blocked them from any other internship in logistics or supply chain management. The language in the documents changed just enough to keep it legal. But the trap stayed the same. They weren't building futures. They were building walls. Saturday morning, Kellan sat across from his mother at the kitchen table. The documents were spread out between them. Renee didn't say anything at first. She just kept her eyes on the papers, flipping slowly. You sure you want to do something with this? She asked finally. He nodded. You know what's going to happen? Yeah, he said quietly. They're going to try to make me look crazy. Or ungrateful. Or both. She set the papers down. Then let's make sure you're loud enough they can't twist it. By Monday morning, whispers were flying. Ariel texted, Your name's everywhere. Something's happening. When Kellan entered the building, the receptionist barely looked at him. His badge still worked, but now his ID had a red banner that said, Temporary access. Review. They were circling the wagons. Bryce avoided him completely. A few others made awkward eye contact, then looked away. By lunch, someone had posted a blurry photo of Kellan from the round table, standing with the folder open, on a private intern group chat. No caption. Just the image, but it said everything. He was no longer that quiet kid. He was the one who made things messy. In the afternoon, Ariel found him in the stairwell. "They're scrambling," she whispered. "Legal's working overtime. I heard one manager say the interns might all have to sign NDAs before the week's out." "Of course they are," he said. "They're trying to plug a leak instead of fixing the pipe." She looked at him. "You're not stopping, are you?" He shook his head. She nodded once. "Then I'm not either." That night, Kellan sent an encrypted email from a new account. Attached were 15 scanned pages of signed contracts, internal memos, and an audio recording from Penfield's visit. He sent it to one person, Candace Mercer, an investigative journalist from the Columbus Dispatch. She'd done stories before on school board corruption and shady local developers. He'd read her stuff, trusted her. 2 hours later, she replied, "I believe you, but I'll need more. We meet, face to face. Safe spot tomorrow." The next day, before leaving home, Kellan stopped at the mirror. He looked at himself for a long time. He didn't feel brave. Didn't feel anything, really. Just focused. At 3:15 p.m. Timami met Mercer at a donut shop near German Village. She was older than he expected. No makeup, cargo jacket, sharp eyes. "You brought these?" she asked, tapping the folder. "All of it," he said. She flipped through for 10 minutes without speaking. "They built this into their entire outreach model," she said eventually. "That's not negligence. That's strategy." She looked up. "You ready for what comes next?" Kellan thought about it. About Halbrook's smile turning cold. About HR's quiet threats. About his mom's hand on his shoulder. "Yeah," he said. "I'm ready." But saying you're ready and actually being ready are two different things, and Kellan was about to learn the difference. The article dropped 2 days later. Front page of the Columbus Dispatch. "Teens trapped by corporate fine print? Halbrook Dynamics under fire." The subheading quoted Kellan directly. "This clause is a trap." The story laid everything out. Timelines, emails, even excerpts from internal memos that Mercer had verified against public records. She didn't name the whistleblower. She didn't have to. The interns knew. The executives knew. Halbrook definitely knew. By noon, 3 local radio stations were discussing it live. One called it a stunning betrayal of trust. Another painted it as just another example of corporate manipulation. Kellan stayed home from the program that day. HR had left him 2 voicemails asking for a clarification meeting. His access had been quietly revoked from every company system. But he wasn't trying to log in anymore. He was trying to pull back the whole curtain. That afternoon, Penfield called him from a private number. "You have no idea how loud this is," he said. "I can guess," Kellan replied. "They're panicking upstairs. There's a draft email circulating about suspending the entire youth program. Halbrook's yelling at comms to fix it before it spreads beyond Ohio. It's already past Ohio," Kellan said. "It's online now." Penfield hesitated. "They're gonna come after you next. Not just legally. They'll dig. School records, social media. Try to smear you before you speak again." Kellan stared out his bedroom window. "Then I'll say more." That night, Ariel FaceTimed him. "You okay?" "Till here," he said. "You saw what Mercer wrote about the non-disparagement stuff?" "Yeah. That's what pissed people off the most." "Same." She paused. "My cousin's in law school. He said if enough pressure builds, they'll have to settle and rewrite the whole program. Maybe even refund students they cut off." Kellan leaned back in his chair. "They were never planning to give us a real future. Just the illusion of one." "Not anymore," she said. "You flipped the script." He smiled for the first time in days. But the next morning, things got colder. When his mom opened the front door, there was a plain white envelope on the mat. No stamp, no name. Inside, a cease and desist letter signed by Halbrook's legal team. The message was simple. Stop talking, retract statements, or face consequences. Renee read it twice. Her hands didn't shake, but her jaw clenched. "They think this scares us?" she asked. "They think I'll fold," Kellan replied. She looked him in the eyes. "We don't fold. Not in this house." the story didn't slow down. In fact, it spread. A small news blog in Indianapolis ran a follow-up titled, "We got the same contracts last year." Another student, a girl named Tanisha Rowe, came forward with her documents. Same wording, same clauses, same outcome. Within 48 hours, Mercer had what she needed for a second article, a pattern of exploitation dressed up as mentorship. Meanwhile, Halbrook Dynamics stayed quiet. Their official statement, released that evening, said, "We believe in the value of investing in future talent. Any language in our contracts that may have caused confusion will be reviewed internally." It didn't say much, but the silence afterward said even more. Back channels started lighting up. A source from inside the marketing department leaked that the CEO was furious, not just about the article, but that a teenager had turned his golden PR program into a scandal. Penfield texted Kellan at midnight. "Halbrook wants a fall guy. Don't be surprised if they make you the story instead of the contracts." Kellan responded, "Let them try." But the more they tried to silence him, the louder the truth became. And now, it wasn't just about contracts anymore. It was about what they thought they could get away with. It started with a burner account on Twitter, just a black screen and a thread of screenshots, internal emails, redacted memos, subject lines like YPP eligibility review, minor oversight, and media risk assessment, containment strategy. The captions were brief but brutal. They knew the contracts were flawed. They used exclusivity to limit outside access. This isn't mentorship, it's control. No one knew who ran the account, but people noticed fast. Within hours, the thread had 10,000 retweets. Journalists were tagging each other. Even verified lawyers weighed in, calling it deeply unethical and possibly legally actionable. Kellan wasn't behind the account, but he knew exactly who was. He met Penfield again, this time in a diner on the edge of town, far from the glass towers and polished marble of Halbrook HQ. The man looked tired, tie loosened, shoulders heavier. "I gave the files to someone I trust," Penfield said, stirring his coffee without drinking it. "They're the one posting now. Keeps me protected. And keeps the story alive." Kellan nodded. "You think Halbrook's watching?" Obsessively. Penfield glanced around. "The man built his image on clean ambition. Polished inclusion. You peeled that paint right off." Kellan frowned. "This was never about taking him down. I just didn't want the next group getting played the same way." Penfield looked at him carefully. "You don't get to pick how truth spreads, Kellan. You started a fire. Now people are watching who never paid attention before. Back at school, it was a different world. Teachers who barely spoke to him before now asked about the article. One pulled him aside after class and whispered, "You said what needed to be said." But it wasn't all praise. A few students thought he'd ruined it for everyone. "I heard the program's getting shut down," one classmate said, annoyed. "That was my chance to get out of here." Kellan didn't argue. He just said, "If they needed to trap you to help you, it wasn't real help." That night, Candace Mercer called him. "I need you on record," she said. "I already gave you my statements. I need more than quotes. I need you. Name, face, audio. If this goes national, they'll say you hid behind shadows. You're the one who stood up. Let people see that." There was a long pause on his end. Then, "Okay." The next morning, they met at a small recording studio behind a non-profit youth center. No flashing cameras, just a mic, a dim ring light. And the truth. Kellan sat in front of the mic and told the story from the beginning. The elevator that didn't work. The missing computer. The HR meeting with smiles that didn't reach their eyes. The temporary reassignment. And finally, the moment he raised his hand. "I wasn't trying to blow anything up," he said into the mic. "I just couldn't stay quiet. They expected us to nod and sign. But I read it. I saw it for what it was." Mercer leaned forward. "And what was it?" Kellan looked at her, his voice calm, no edge. "A trap with a gold label." 2 days later, the video went live. 6 minutes long. Cut clean. His voice clear. No dramatic music, no slow zooms, just truth. By noon, it had 200,000 views. By evening, a local activist group had called for a protest outside Halbrook HQ. By midnight, someone had posted drone footage of the company's building, with cardboard signs hanging from 2 balconies. "We're not your brand. Mentorship ownership." But what started as one voice was now an echo, and echoes grow when people finally stop pretending not to hear them. On Thursday morning, Kellan woke up to a group text from Ariel. They cancelled the youth program, effective immediately. No ceremony, no explanation. Just a vague press release about restructuring opportunities for future talent. Halbrook Dynamics had quietly removed every mention of the youth partnership program from their website. The banner ad that once read, "Tomorrow's Leaders Today," was gone, replaced by a photo of solar panels. But the damage was already done. By noon, students from the 3 cities affected had organized a live-streamed town hall. The title was simple: "We were promised futures. We got contracts." One by one, teens told their stories. Tanisha Rowe from Indianapolis, Trevor McGill from Toledo, Ariel from Columbus. They weren't just talking about the contracts. They were talking about what it felt like to be used for press photos, to be told you were exceptional, right before being boxed in. The stream hit 500,000 views in a day. Halbrook tried to respond. A new video appeared on their social media channels, featuring the CEO himself, Richard Halbrook, in a navy suit against a white backdrop, with hands folded in practiced concern. "We've always believed in nurturing the next generation," he began. "If we've fallen short in that mission, we take full responsibility." But it wasn't an apology. Not really. He didn't mention Kellan, didn't mention contracts, just spoke in long sentences about realigning intent with execution. Comments were turned off within 10 minutes. The next day, Kellan walked into East High School for his final period. A hallway monitor stopped him. "Hey," she said softly. "You got a second?" He turned. "I just wanted to say, my nephew was in that program last year. I didn't know what they did to those kids." "Thank you." Kellan nodded once, surprised. "He okay?" "He is now," she smiled. "And proud. Says he knows the boy who spoke up." Meanwhile, Mercer's second story dropped. This one wasn't about Halbrook. It was about the system behind him. She named board members, outlined lobbying efforts to secure youth programs in vulnerable districts, and traced how smaller companies had copied the same contract model under different branding. She called it "Soft Control: How Corporations Bury Futures in Fine Print." It trended for 2 straight days. Kellan was invited to speak at a City Hall education panel. He wore the same button-down from his first day at Halbrook, this time tucked in neater, sleeves rolled at the elbow. He stood behind the mic, voice steady. "I'm not against opportunity," he said. "I'm against opportunity that comes with invisible strings. If you're going to help us, help us. Don't sell us an open door that locks behind us." The room clapped. Not politely. Loudly. Somewhere in the back, Penfield was there, watching. Quiet. Proud. That weekend, Halbrook Dynamics made its first real move. Richard Halbrook resigned. Officially, he cited a desire to focus on family and personal well-being. Unofficially, sources confirmed that the board had pressured him to step down after internal emails, leaked anonymously, revealed that he had approved the language in the youth contracts himself, with full knowledge of their implications. They scrubbed his quotes from company pages. But the internet never forgets. Kellan didn't celebrate. Instead, he went to his favorite diner, ordered pancakes, and sat with Ariel and her cousin, who was now offering to help draft a new version of a youth mentorship model, with real protections, real terms, and full transparency. "This whole thing started with one sentence," Ariel said. "One sentence in one meeting." Kellan looked down at the worn corner of his notebook. "Yeah," he said. "One sentence they didn't think anyone would read out loud. But the right words, at the right time, can change everything, especially when spoken by someone they didn't expect." 3 weeks later, Kellan was invited back to the Halbrook building, not as an intern, but as a panelist. Not everyone was thrilled. Some executives whispered about optics. One even left the room before the event started. But the company had no choice. Public pressure was still high, and Mercer's third story, this time with voices from inside Halbrook Dynamics itself, had made it clear. Silence wasn't an option anymore. The event was labeled a Community Accountability Forum. Fancy words for something simple. We got caught, and now we have to face it. Kellan didn't wear a tie. He wore the same grey sweater he always liked. Comfortable, unbothered. Ariel sat beside him. She wasn't speaking, but she wanted to be there. Across the table sat 3 new board members. Diversity hires, someone had whispered. But Kellan didn't care about titles anymore. He cared about action. "I'm not here for revenge," he said into the mic. "I'm here to make sure what happened to us doesn't get packaged and sold again with new language." One of the board members, a woman named Geneva Harrington, nodded thoughtfully. "So what would a real mentorship look like to you?" He didn't hesitate. "Transparency, accountability, contracts that can be read by a 17-year-old, access to legal review before signing, and no fine print that hides harm behind opportunity." Another board member jotted something down. "And what would you call that model?" Geneva asked. Kellan looked at her, then out at the students in the audience. "Respect." Within a month, Halbrook Dynamics announced a full overhaul of their internship and mentorship programs. No exclusivity clauses, no social media restrictions. Every student would be assigned a third-party legal advisor before signing anything. Ariel's cousin helped draft the new documents. Penfield, now working at a different firm, reviewed them unofficially. The company didn't call it the Kellan Clause, but people did. Quietly at first. Then louder. Not as a joke. As a standard. Meanwhile, Kellan returned to school. He was still a senior. Still had math quizzes and late buses and missed locker combinations. But something had shifted. Not in how he saw himself, but in how the world looked at him. One afternoon, his principal pulled him aside. "There's a student from Glenmont asking for you," he said. "Says she read about you. Wants help reading her internship paperwork." Kellan smiled. "Yeah, I got time." He walked into the guidance office and sat with a freshman girl holding a thick contract and wide eyes. "Don't worry," he said. "We'll go through it together." Months passed. The story moved on. The news cycle changed. New scandals took the spotlight. But something lingered. In classrooms, in HR departments, in mentorship offices across the Midwest. That one question: would a kid like Kellan catch this? And if the answer was yes, they fixed it. Because now they knew, some teenagers don't just read between the lines. They rewrite them. On a warm spring evening, Kellan stood behind a podium at an after-school foundation fundraiser. Not as a guest, as the keynote. He looked out over a crowd of teachers, donors, students, and old mentors, some of whom hadn't spoken to him since before the article. He told them a story, not about clauses or scandals, but about the power of paying attention. "The system counts on us being too tired, too distracted, or too scared to speak," he said. "But silence isn't safety. Silence is just permission in disguise." The room stayed quiet for a second. Then the applause came. Real, loud, long. Not for the scandal, not for the exposure, but for the reminder. That one voice, clear and honest, still matters. So if you're watching this and you've been told to stay quiet, to not make waves, to wait your turn, ask yourself, who does that really protect? Speak when it counts, even if your voice shakes, especially then. Subscribe for more real stories that remind us how truth, spoken plainly, still has power.